Slide, Virtual Public Meeting. ANCSA 17D1 Withdrawals Environmental Impact Statement Virtual Public Scoping Meetings. September 22nd, September 24th, and October 4th, 2022. Welcome. The meeting will begin shortly. Thank you for your patience as we wait for others to join. Please join using computer audio. If you are having issues accessing your audio, please send a chat message to hosts and panelists. To access the live transcript of the meeting at the bottom of your screen, click Live Transcript, then select Show Subtitle. Please note this transcript is computer generated by Zoom and is not an official verbatim transcript of the meeting. This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the virtual public scoping meeting for the ANCSA 17D1 Withdrawals Environmental Impact Statement. My name is Amanda Biederman, and I work for EMPSI and serve as a public outreach specialist for the project. We are a national environmental consulting firm working with the BLM to facilitate this forum and manage the Zoom application. With me on the call are my coworkers from EMPSI, Kate Krebs, Sean Cottle, Val Stanson, and David Scott. I will be assisting the BLM today with facilitation of the forum and public input session. Before beginning today's presentation, we will briefly review the meeting agenda and the participation rules. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. To enable the use of closed captions, you can click the live transcript button icon on your Zoom toolbar and then select Show Subtitles. Next slide.
Slide, Meeting Agenda. A bullet point list.
Slide 2, Meeting Agenda. During today's meeting, we will outline the meeting approach and give a presentation about the project. The presentation will provide an overview of the planning area and describe the purpose of the environmental impact statement. Following the presentation, we will then move into the question and answer session. The final portion of the meeting will allow for public input as part of the formal scoping process. Before we get started today, I will turn it over to Acting Anchorage District Manager, Lenore Hepler.
Good evening, everyone. We are embarking on a process today that could change how millions of acres of public land are managed for decades to come. We're going to be looking at questions like, should areas be open to the staking of new mining claims? And should certain lands be open for state selection to meet their entitlement under the Alaska Statehood Act? And how will these changes affect lands open to federal subsistence hunting priority? It is essential that we hear from and understand the concerns of the American public and the people who use and value these lands, so we can make a well-reasoned recommendation to the Secretary. I want you also to know that while we are in the first stages of public involvement in this process, it is but the first. There will be many more opportunities for you to share your thoughts and concerns. We will be reaching out to the communities involved, tribal governments, the Native corporations, the state of Alaska, and other interested parties. It is our goal to help everyone understand the possibilities and the ramification of these changes and to hear public input. Thank you for joining us today.
Slide, Meeting Logistics. Bullet point list.
Great, thank you, Lenore. And we can go to the next slide. Slide 3, Meeting Logistics. Attendee videos will be turned off for the duration of the meeting. Questions will be received during the question and answer session using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. During the meeting, if you need technical assistance with your Zoom features, you can enter your message in the chat feature, also located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and a technician will contact you. We will also be sharing links and information in that chat feature throughout the meeting today, and you can copy and paste those links and information out of the chat feature and save them for a later time. Your microphone will remain muted until the public input session at the very end of the meeting. at which time the facilitator will enable microphones as needed. Verbal input will be open to participants that indicated interest in speaking during registration. Others will be called upon in response to a raised hand. Next slide.
Slide, meeting details. A bullet point list.
Slide 4, meeting details. Displayed on the screen are some meeting controls located in your Zoom toolbar that you can access during the meeting. If you do not see your Zoom toolbar, you may need to toggle your mouse around or push on your phone screen for it to pop up. Again, we will provide more detailed instructions during the Q&A and verbal input sessions on how to access these features. We do ask that you avoid using inappropriate language and respect all participants and viewpoints for the duration of this meeting. Next slide.
Slide, acronyms and definitions.
Slide 5, acronyms and definitions. We wanted to share a few commonly used acronyms and definitions of terms used during this presentation. While we will try to keep the use of acronyms to a minimum, there are a few you will hear us often say, so let's run through them. ANCSA is the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971. DoD is the Department of Defense. EIS is Environmental Impact Statement. ESA is the Endangered Species Act of 1973. FLTMA is the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. NHPA is the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. And PLO is Public Land Order. Public land orders are actions implemented by the Secretary of the Interior to make, modify, extend, or revoke land withdrawals under the authority of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. Withdrawals withdraw the lands in federal ownership, effectively removing an area of federal land from settlement, sale, location, or entry for the purpose of limiting activities under those laws to maintain other public values in the area, or reserving it for a particular public purpose or program. Withdrawals are also used to transfer jurisdiction over federal land from one department, bureau, or agency to another. I would now like to introduce Rachel Jones, the BLM project manager, to introduce the project and the team. And we can also flip to slide 6, introductions.
Slide, introductions. Presenters, Rachel Jones, BLM Project Manager. Amanda Biederman, MC Public Outreach Specialist. Team members, Chelsea Kreiner, Serena Sweet.
Good evening, and thank you for joining our meeting. My name is Rachel Jones, and I'm the BLM Project Manager assigned to this EIS. We are currently in the process of gathering information to inform the development of this environmental impact statement. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide you information on what this project is about. We also want to provide you with an opportunity to give us verbal and written input during the scoping period, so we have that information as we move forward into preparing the EIS. We have not yet started preparing the EIS. Rather, we've just begun the process under the National Environmental Policy Act by opening the scoping period. We are engaging you to hear thoughts, input, and concerns tonight to help us identify issues and alternatives that will be carried into the environmental impact statement. We also have some additional support here tonight behind the scenes to help us answer questions. On the line, we have Chelsea Kreiner. Chelsea is our BLM Alaska Withdrawals Coordinator. We also have on the line tonight Serena Sweet, our BLM Alaska Supervisory Planner and Environmental Coordinator. Both of those folks will be helping us answer questions related to the project and the NEPA process tonight.
Slide, project presentation. A bullet point list.
Great, thank you, Rachel. We can go ahead and go on to the next slide. Slide 7, project presentation. We will now start the project presentation. This presentation will cover some background information to help everyone understand how we got here, what the focus of the EIS will be, EIS and NEPA process and our expected timeline. We will discuss the project area, how to participate in this scoping period, and the type of input that is very helpful for the BLM and that will guide our preparation of the EIS. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and start that presentation.
Slide, background.
Slide 8, background. Only Congress and the Secretary of the Interior have the authority to make, modify, extend, or revoke land withdrawals. When the BLM identifies a need to act on a land withdrawal, the appropriate environmental reviews are coordinated, and the BLM makes a recommendation to the Secretary on how to proceed. The BLM made recommendations to revoke or partially revoke ANCSA 17D1 withdrawals and the approved resource management plans for Bay, Bering Sea Western Interior, East Alaska, Kobuk Seward Peninsula, and Ring of Fire planning areas. In January 2021, the Secretary acted on those recommendations by signing 5 public land orders, which would have revoked withdrawals established under ANCSA Section 17D1 in these 5 planning areas. In February 2021, the Department reviewed those public land order decisions and identified certain procedural and legal defects in the decision-making process, and subsequently directed the BLM to address the legal defects in the decision through preparation of an environmental impact statement or EIS.
Slide, focus of EIS.
Slide 9, focus of EIS. This EIS will focus on addressing the legal deficiencies the department identified during their review, which include insufficient analysis under NEPA, failure to follow Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, NHPA, possible failure to adequately evaluate impacts under Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, ESA, failure to secure consent from the Department of Defense, DoD, with regard to lands under DoD administration, as well as failure to adequately analyze potential impacts on subsistence hunting and fishing, and reliance on potentially outdated data in EISs prepared in 2006 and 2007.
Slide, EIS NEPA process and timeline.
10. EIS NEPA process and timeline. The EIS process started on August 18, 2022, when the Notice of Intent was published in the Federal Register, opening a 60-day scoping period. This comment period closes on October 17, 2022. After the scoping period concludes, the BLM will compile the input we received from external stakeholders in the form of a scoping report that will be published on the project website. The BLM will use that information to focus on issues and alternatives that will be analyzed in our EIS. Analysis of issues and alternatives and preparation of the analysis into the EIS will take some time, but we expect to have a draft EIS for public review in the summer 2023, with a minimum of 60 days for comment. Part of the preparation of the draft EIS will be reviewing the EISs prepared in 2006 and 2007 and determining what analysis needs to be updated or identifying analysis that may be missing. After the comment period on the draft EIS is complete, the BLM will address public comments and prepare and publish the final EIS and recommendation to the Secretary.
Slide, proposed action.
Slide 11, proposed action overview. The proposed action is to revoke ANCSA 17D1 withdrawals on lands described in January 2021 Public Land Orders 7899, 7900, 7901, 7902, and 7903, which totals approximately 28 million acres across the 5 planning areas.
Slide, Project Area Map. A link.
Slide 12, Project Map Area. The BLM prepared a web map for this project, which is what I'm going to access for this presentation. This web map is accessed through our project website.
A website.
On the project website, listed on the menu to the left-hand side of the web map page, there is a Maps tab. Click on that tab and you will see a section for both static maps in PDF, those are listed at the bottom of the page, and a link to the web map at the top.
A map of Alaska.
The project area includes lands in Bay, Bering Sea Western Interior, East Alaska, Kobuk-Seward Peninsula, and Ring of Fire planning areas, which cover the western and southern portions of Alaska. The areas under evaluation are limited to the withdrawal areas that were described in the January 2021 public land orders. This map is showing the 5 planning areas with a black outline and depicts the D1 withdrawal evaluation areas with a black hatching pattern. The D1 withdrawals layer is listed as one of the layers on the legend to the right and is named D1 withdrawals within evaluation area.
Checkboxes.
The evaluation area makes up approximately 28 million acres. Within this evaluation area, there are several different types of lands. For example, there are special recreation management areas, areas of environmental critical concern, native selected land, state selected land, and state top filed land. The land status types and land use designations mentioned can be viewed by finding their layer on the legend to the right and clicking on the box next to the layer name.
Zooms in on the map.
This map is a dynamic map that will allow users to pan around and zoom in and out of areas of interest. Also available on the project website is series of print-ready maps in PDF format.
Slide, Alternatives. A bullet point list.
Slide 13, Alternatives. The BLM is required to include alternatives in any proposal which involves unresolved conflicts concerning alternative uses of available resources. The proposed revocations have the potential to allow obtaining mining claims, location, or applications for title, entry, under public land laws, including the mining laws, and may result in changes to the land use. Changes to the existing land use could affect local residents, recreation access, wildlife, vegetation, cultural resources, subsistence use, air resources, and water resources. The BLM will consider a range of alternatives in this EIS. Alternatives could include full or partial revocation of the ENCSA 17D1 withdrawals, meaning that we could evaluate an alternative that revokes some areas of the withdrawals but leaves other areas with the withdrawal in place, or alternatives could include retaining withdrawal protections through a different type of withdrawal, such as those under the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, or FLPMA withdrawals. Alternatives will be based on what the BLM hears from interested stakeholders during this scoping period.
Slide, How to comment.
Slide 14, How to comment. There are many ways to provide scoping comments during the scoping period. The BLM is hosting 3 virtual public meetings, which are listed on BLM's e-planning website and advertised on social media. All public comments will be recorded for the record. You can also fill out a comment form online, submit comments by regular mail, or deliver them in person to any BLM office. The address is Bureau of Land Management. Attention, ANCSA 17D1 Withdrawals EIS, 222 West 7th Avenue, Suite 13, Anchorage, Alaska, 99513. All comments must be received by October 17th, 2022 to be included in the scoping report. Comments received after that date will be considered but will not be incorporated into the scoping report.
Slide, comments most helpful to BLM.
15. Comments most helpful to BLM.
A link.
Public and stakeholder input most helpful to BLM includes comments that relate to potential impacts associated with full or partial revocation of the ANCSA 17D1 withdrawals in the areas under evaluation. Examples may include identifying important subsistence use areas or recreation use areas that could be affected by potential changes in the existing land use. BLM has guidance for making substantive comments, which you can access online at https://www.blm.gov/PLANN-DEBEPLANED-ALASKA.
Slide, thank you. An email and link.
Slide 16. Thank you. This concludes the scoping presentation. The BLM has prepared some FAQs for this project that are available on the project website. If you have questions about information shared in this presentation, you can refer to the FAQ document or email Rachel Jones at rajones@blm.gov.
Slide, question and answer session. Screenshot of Zoom interface. An arrow points at a text field. Text, welcome to Q&A.
All right, hello everyone. Again, my name is Amanda Biederman with EMPSI, and I will be assisting with the question and answer session this evening. I wanted to provide a quick reminder to everyone that a recording of this entire meeting will be made available on the project website. We would like to answer any NEPA and EIS related questions that you may have asked either during registration or that you might have on the material that we presented this evening. We will take about 20 minutes to answer questions that you have on the presentation. Again, this is your opportunity this evening to ask questions to BLM staff who are present on the meeting today. If you have any public comments that you would like to provide, please save them for the public input portion of the meeting that will begin shortly after this question and answer session. Let's review the forum guidelines, and then we will begin our question and answer session. Step 1, please click on the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Again, you may have to toggle your mouse around to get the toolbar to pop up, where you can then select the Q&A feature. Step 2, type your question into the Q&A feature. Please note that you can submit your questions anonymously if you would like. If your question is within the scope of the project and the BLM is able to respond to it today, a specialist from the BLM will then either answer your question live or type an answer back to the entire audience. If you are on the phone, you can press *9 to indicate that you have a question, and your microphone will be opened for your question. Once your question has been asked, the host will close your microphone and the specialist will provide an answer. In the interest of time, we are only able to allow verbal questions from participants on the phone and ask that others please enter their questions into the Q&A feature. We will reserve some time at the end of our Q&A session for any phone callers who might join us today. We will do our very best to answer all of the in-scope questions received today. However, it is possible that we will not get to everyone's questions tonight. So if the BLM was not able to get to your question today, or if you seek additional information, please refer to the project website, or again, you can contact Rachel Jones at rajones@blm.gov. And please note that if your question is outside the scope of this project or inappropriate, it will be dismissed and will not be responded to by the BLM today. So at this time, we'll give everyone a few minutes to access that Q&A feature, again, located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please don't submit any questions via that chat feature. Again, that chat feature is intended for information that we would like to distribute out to our attendees today, or if you're having a technical issue with one of your Zoom features, you can send us a message and we'll try and troubleshoot that for you. So again, you can use that Q&A feature. So at this time, as we wait for our live questions to come in, we're going to go through some of our questions that were submitted upon registration when our attendees registered for today's meeting. So our first question that we received via registration was, why are you not relying on the previous evaluations of these PLOs completed under the respective management plan reviews? And we can provide a typed response to that. I'll have to read our typed response aloud since that was a pre-registration question. We can drop that into the chat features though, so that you can read our full response as well. But our response is, after review of the January 2021 decisions to revoke the D1 withdrawals in these areas, certain procedural and legal defects were identified in the decision-making process, such as insufficient analysis under NEPA and failure to comply with the National Historic Preservation Act, or NHPA. Due to the identified deficiencies, the Department of the Interior, relying on inherent authority to revisit decisions based on identified legal errors, delayed the opening of lands and provided an opportunity for updated environmental analysis and time to follow the correct procedural requirements. So again, that was a question that was submitted upon registration. We can paste that question along with our typed response into the chat feature. So you can open up that chat feature and read our full typed response that I just read aloud. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our second question that was received via our registration page for this meeting tonight. And the question, it was more of a request, but the attendee stated that they had a request for in-person hearings with big maps provided. And we're going to provide a live response to this pre-registration question tonight. And I'm going to go to Serena Sweet with the BLM to provide that response.
Hello. So yeah, in response to that, at this time, no in-person public meetings are scheduled during the scoping phase of this environmental impact statement process. However, we are developing our post-scoping public outreach plan currently, and we'll be determining how and where we will be reaching out to interested stakeholders following the scoping process. So please check back on our website or contact us for additional information. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Serena, for that response. All right, we'll move on to our next question. And this question was submitted via our Q&A feature tonight. Those were all of the pre-registration questions that we received for tonight's meeting. So our question that came in through the Q&A feature was, is this related to the Ambler Access Project? And again, we're providing a typed response to that question. And our typed response is no, the Ambler Road project is separate and will be analyzed via a separate supplemental EIS. The notice of intent for the Ambler SEIS, or Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement, published on September 20th, and additional information is available at the BLM website at www.BLM.gov/Alaska. And if you go to your Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, in your answered column, you should be able to see our typed response to that. Depending on which version of Zoom you have, you might not be able to see those answered questions, but please know that any questions that we are providing a typed response to tonight, I'll make sure that I read those aloud in case you can't access that feature of your Q&A box. All right, so we will continue to wait for additional questions from our attendees today. Again, you can see the instructions on the screen. You can go to your Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Type your question in. You can send it anonymously if you would like. Send it over to us. And if it is within the scope of today's project, a BLM specialist will come on and either respond to your question verbally, or again, we'll provide a typed response and I'll make sure I read that aloud for everyone. We have about 15 or so minutes remaining in our Q&A session before, again, we'll move into that verbal public input portion of today's meeting. So if you have a any verbal input you would like to provide this evening, please wait for that portion of the meeting.
Text, Step 1, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Icon of Q&A with dialog boxes. Text, Step 2, type your question and press the send button. Step 3, wait for BLM to answer your questions live or written. Guidance, only submit your question once. BLM will answer questions as quickly as possible. However, it may take a few minutes for them to process the question to provide the answer. Do not use the chat button to submit a question, only use the Q&A icon.
Again, you can go ahead and access that Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And please be patient while we process those questions and designate a BLM staffer who is best suited to respond to your questions this evening. All right, we have our next question from participants this evening, and I'll just read it verbatim. It's a long question, so bear with me here. But again, once we select it as answered, it will pop over into your answered column, so you'll be able to view the entire question there. So the question is, will the scope of the EIS include ensuring that sufficient ENCSA 17D1 withdrawal acreage remains to fulfill the BLM's statutory duty to convey lands to the Alaska Native corporations? And the attendee stated that even though it has been 50 years since the passage of ENCSA, the federal government has still not conveyed over 1 million acres of federal land to Native corporations that was required under ENCSA. Moreover, much of this unconveyed entitlement acreage has not yet been selected by the relevant Native corporations, which makes it particularly critical to keep sufficient federal lands in 17D1 withdrawal status to meet this important statutory requirement. All right, so I think we might provide an initial live response to this, and then we might follow up with an additional typed response. So Chelsea Kriener with the BLM, I can go to you first to see if you have any live input that you want to provide. And again, we can follow up with some typed input if needed as well. And I can help you get unmuted here, Chelsea, if needed.
Thank you. Sorry, that was eluding me, the mute button.
No problem.
So that's a great question. Thank you for submitting that. And at this time, we want to make sure we're getting you accurate information, and I don't have a really good answer for you, but please be sure to contact us or submit comments, and we can get you some better information later on.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. And if any additional BLM panelists have additional verbal input that they want to provide, feel free to unmute yourself now. And again, we can mark that as live in our question and answer feature here, but we can also provide some additional typed response, and I'll go back and read that as well. All right, I don't see any additional BLM staff who have unmuted. So again, we'll go ahead and move on to our additional questions received coming in via that Q&A feature. And we have about 10 minutes remaining in our question and answer session. So again, you can send those questions over into the Q&A feature, and we will provide kind of a mix of either a live response, a typed response, or it might be a little bit of both this evening. All right, so we'll move on to our next question that we've received via the Q&A feature, which is, what specific procedural deficiencies were made in making the 2021 decision? If you are unable/unwilling to provide those details tonight, will those details be thoroughly disclosed in the draft EIS? And it looks like we're going to, I believe, provide a typed response to that one as well here. Are there any BLM staff who want to come on and provide an initial live response to that while we work on our typed response? All right, so we'll definitely, we're working on our typed response to that. Once we get that ready to go, we'll send it over into our Q&A feature this evening. And again, I will make sure that I read through those typed responses as well. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question submitted. Again, we are working on some of our typed responses. I'll make sure that we get those into the Q&A feature and that I read through those typed responses fully. Our next question is, will this affect State of Alaska selections as well? And it looks like we're going to go back to Chelsea Kriener to provide an initial response to this question. And I can unmute you here again, Chelsea, if needed.
Thank you. The State of Alaska selections that are in place won't be affected by this process. There is the potential that revoking withdrawals could allow state top filings to become effective selections, which could change the land use patterns.
Great, thank you, Chelsea, for that response. And if any additional BLM panelists have any additional input that they want to provide, feel free to unmute. For now, we'll continue to work our way through our questions submitted via the Q&A feature. Oh, and it looks like we were able to provide a typed response. Let me go ahead. We can copy and paste that into the Q&A feature here. Oh, we already did. All right. So that was in regards to what specific procedural deficiencies were made in the 2021 decision. So our typed response, again, you can see that in the answered column that we have, but our typed response was the legal deficiencies the department identified during their review, which include insufficient analysis under NEPA, failure to follow Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, or NHPA, possible failure to adequately evaluate impacts under Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, or ESA, failure to secure consent from the Department of Defense, or DoD, with regard to lands under DoD administration, as well as failure to adequately analyze potential impacts on subsistence hunting and fishing, and reliance on potentially outdated data in EISs prepared in 2006 and 2007. So thank you for sending that question over. And again, you can go read our full typed response in that answered column of your Q&A feature. All right, we'll move on to our next question that came in via the Q&A feature. So the question is, one of the procedural deficiencies in the proposed PLOs was the lack of consultation with Alaska Native corporations and tribes, as required by a number of federal statutes, regulations, executive orders, and policies. So the question is, will the scope of the EIS include correcting this critical procedural deficiency? And I will go to Lenore Hepler with the BLM to provide a response to that question.
Yes, thank you for the question. And yes, we are planning to have robust consultation with tribal governments, with ANCSA corporations, and outreach to other affected groups, particularly the state. We talked a bit about how this could affect state selections. So we're working right now, as we said earlier, on building that plan and outreaching to communities that have that we think have expressed interest. We did send out letters to all potential cooperating agencies and tribal governments requesting, asking them if they want to be cooperating agencies, if that's something possible for them, and do they want government to government consultation. But we'll be following that up with phone calls and reaching out. So we do intend to have a lot of meetings and go over all this information and take comment that will help us make these recommendations. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lenore, for that response. I'll go ahead and put you back on mute. All right, and we'll move on to any additional questions coming in via the Q&A feature that are within the scope of the project today. We have about 5 minutes remaining on our question and answer session. So again, you can access that Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen and send your question over to us, and hopefully we can get that answered today. Again, if you have any verbal public input that you would like to provide this evening, we'll get started with our public input session here shortly. We're working our way through our last questions received here through the Q&A feature. And we will leave some time. I see that we had one phone caller join us. For those of you who maybe did just join us this evening, I will provide again some links in the chat where you can go for further information, or if you feel like your question wasn't fully answered this evening. So I just dropped the project website link into the chat feature, as well as the contact information again for the BLM project manager, Rachel Jones. All right, so we have our next question from our participants on the meeting today. So the attendee noted that those are the legal deficiencies. What procedures were not followed? And it looks like I will go to Rachel Jones with the BLM to provide a response to that question.
Yep, thank you. Great question. So part of the legal deficiencies that we disclosed in the earlier question were procedures. One of those procedures is following the process that's laid out under Section 106. That's one example of a procedure and process that was not followed, not necessarily a technical legal deficiency, as we kind of defined some of those in the list earlier.
Great, thank you, Rachel, for that response. All right, we are still working on our last question that we've received via the Q&A feature, but I do know that we have a phone caller on the line. So right now I'll read over those instructions while we work on this other response here, see if that phone caller might have any questions this evening. So for our phone caller, we acknowledge that you cannot access the Q&A feature. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask this evening, you can press *9 on your phone keypad to let us know that you have a question. Again, we are in our Q&A session at the moment. We're just wrapping up these last few questions here. If you have any verbal public input that you would like to provide, please save that for the public input portion that we'll get started with here shortly. But again, you can press *9 on your phone keypad. All right, so I think we have time to respond to our last question in our Q&A feature before we go ahead and head on to our public input portion of this evening's meeting.
This is Serena. I'll go ahead and take this question. So this question is do we have a report of consultation that was done previously? The answer to that is there's several different sections in the existing resource management plans that outline previous consultation efforts. However, through this EIS process, we will have a summary of the past and ongoing consultation efforts as they apply to this project that can be reviewed. That will be available in the draft environmental impact statement.
Great. Thank you, Serena, for that response. All right, so at this time, we did address all of our in-scope questions that were received via that Q&A feature. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and head into our public input portion of this evening's meeting. Again, I have dropped some information on how you can submit any additional questions you might have to the BLM project manager, or if you want more information on the project, we did provide an updated project website link that hopefully will take you directly to the project website. All right, so if we want to go ahead and head on to our next slide.
Slide, public comment session, ground
Slide
rules.
18, public comment session, ground rules. We are now going to begin the verbal public input portion of today's meeting. We will be accepting verbal public input only for this portion of the meeting. Again, if the BLM was not able to get to your question during the question and answer session, or if you seek additional information, please refer to the project website or contact Rachel Jones at rajones@blm.gov. I will remind everyone that your microphone will remain closed until you have been called on to provide your input. We will display all of the ways to provide input once more following the verbal input session, and the virtual project website address will be displayed during the input session. Because the BLM wants to hear from all members of the public, we will be using the following guidelines. First, please be mindful of the length of your comment so that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to do so today. Second, comments should be focused on this specific project. Third, please be respectful of others and their viewpoints. And finally, please refrain from using profanity. While passion is welcome in your comment, policy requires that we mute anyone who uses inappropriate language because we are recording this meeting and others may be live streaming, so please avoid inappropriate language. If that does happen, we'll provide a reminder before unmuting the person to try again, using words acceptable to all ages. Next slide.
Slide, public scoping session, how to provide verbal input.
Slide 19, how to provide verbal input. I will now read the instructions for those participants who indicated they wanted to offer input when they pre-registered for this meeting. Input will be accepted in the order that people registered. When it is your turn to provide your comment, we will read your name aloud from the list and display your name on the screen. We will also display the name of the commenter who is next in line. When you hear your name called out, please use the raise hand feature so that we know you are available and ready to offer your input. You can access the raise hand feature by clicking on either the reactions icon in your Zoom toolbar or just the raise hand feature in your Zoom toolbar, depending on the version of Zoom that you have. These icons are located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Again, if you wave your mouse back and forth across the bottom of your screen, these icons should appear in your toolbar. You may need to exit out of your full screen Zoom view to see these icons. Or again, if you are calling in through the phone, please press *9 to access the raise hand feature. You can then press *6 on your phone keypad to unmute. Once you have raised your hand, you will then be unmuted so that you can provide your verbal public input. If your audio is not working, you may need to click your unmute button on your computer screen or respond to any pop-up messages about unmuting your microphone. Once you have confirmed audio, please spell out your first and last name for the record before providing your verbal public input. We will then let you know that you can begin your comment, and we will start your on-screen timer. If you are representing an organization or group, please say the name of the group or organization you are representing as a part of your comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to provide their verbal input this evening. Again, we ask that you be mindful and respectful of the length of your verbal public input in order to allow others the opportunity to offer input. After you've provided your input, we will mute you and move on to our next participant. If you do not feel that you were able to complete your verbal public input today, BLM strongly encourages you to submit the remainder of your input in writing. Should there be more time after the initial round of input, those who did not finish may be invited back to finish providing their input. Some registrants may have already had their questions answered and dropped off our meeting today. However, we will still go through our entire list of registered commenters, but if they are not on the meeting, we will move forward quickly to make sure everyone who is still on the meeting has the opportunity to provide input. Once we have worked our way through the list of pre-registered commenters who registered before the start time of today's meeting, we will move on to those who registered after the start time of today's meeting, who selected they wanted to offer a comment. If we still have time remaining after we have worked our way through those participants, we will open the verbal public input portion of today's meeting to anyone who would like to offer a comment today who has not already done so. Next slide.
Slide, public scoping session. Text, commenter, Pamela Miller.
Public scoping session. So our first participant who signed up to offer their verbal input tonight is Pamela Miller. So Pamela, I don't see your name in our list of Zoom attendees. You might be our one phone caller though. So if you are our phone caller, again, you can press *9 on your phone keypad to access that same raise hand feature. Again, you can press *9 if you're calling in through the phone.
Snap timer, 3 minutes.
All right, I don't see a raised hand from our phone caller. So it looks like Pamela is not with us on the meeting. And that was our only pre-registered attendee who registered before the start time of today's meeting, who selected that they wanted to offer a comment. So at this time, I'll go back and look in my Zoom account to see if we have anyone who registered after the start time of today's meeting. And it doesn't look like it. So at this time, since we do have time remaining on our meeting this evening, we'll go ahead and open up the verbal public input portion of the meeting to anyone who would like to provide a comment at this time, regardless of whether you selected yes or no when you registered for tonight's meeting. So if you would like to offer any verbal public input at this time, you are welcome to access that raise hand feature, and we'll just go in the order that we see hands raised. So I'll give everyone a few minutes here to decide if they want to offer any verbal public input this evening. But again, if you don't feel like speaking tonight or you want to provide input at a later time, we have provided the project website for more information in the Zoom chat feature, and we also have it displayed on the screen. All right, and it looks like I just got a message from Jamie Marunde, who stated that they would like to offer a comment. And Jamie, I see your hand raised. So I'll go ahead and get your name up here on the screen. Perfect. And I'll go ahead and ask you to unmute here. If you could spell your first and last name aloud for the record.
Text, Jamie Marund.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you got it just right. So Jamie, Jamie, and my last name is Marunde, so Marundi.
Excellent, Jamie. All right, we'll go ahead and get your 3-minute timer started.
Okay, I am the Vice President of Lands and Natural Resources for Doyne Unlimited. And what I would like to share with you all today for our comment is that we commented and consulted on these resource management plans in part to facilitate the conveyance of our lands, and that we are frustrated that those consultations were inadequate because they resulted in this delay, which has now caused further delay in us getting our conveyances. We don't know how much longer we have to consult our way into the implementation of federal law and the transfer of those lands to us as negotiated under INCSA.
All right, thank you, Jamie, for that comment. I'll go ahead and put you on mute, and we'll move on to anyone else who might want to provide a comment this evening. Again, just like Jamie did, you can either access that raise hand feature. If you're having any issues with your raise hand feature, you can send us a chat message and we'll make sure that we get your name up on the screen so that you can provide your comment this evening.
Text, Tim Schuerch.
All right, I see a raised hand from Tim Schuerch. Tim, apologies if I mispronounced your last name. We'll go ahead and get your name up on the screen here, and then I'll ask you to unmute. There we go. All right, so Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tim. All right, if you'll spell your first and last name aloud for the record, and then we'll start your timer.
Sure. My name is Tim Shirk, TIMSCHUERCH.
All right, we'll go ahead and start your timer. Thanks, Tim.
I'm the Senior Counsel for Lands for Calista Corporation, the ANCSA Regional Corporation for the Southwest region of Alaska. Like Doyon just expressed, Calista is concerned that we have not yet received all of a significant part of our land entitlements. According to our records, and we believe BLM's records, we still have an unconveyed entitlement of about 330,000 acres of land. It's been 50 years since ANCSA. And so we similarly encourage BLM to expedite that process. We also share with Doyon the concern that we need to be adequately consulted with, both us as a native corporation under ANCSA, and also our tribes do need to be consulted with.
Great, thank you, Tim, for that comment. I'll go ahead and put you on mute, and we'll move on to any additional commenters this evening. Again, if you want to provide a comment, you can access that raise hand feature in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If that's not showing up for you, you can send us a chat message and let us know that you would like to provide verbal public input this evening. And again, for our phone caller, if you'd like to provide verbal public input, you can access that same raise hand feature by pressing *9 on your phone keypad. Again, if you would like to provide any verbal public input this evening, you can let us know by accessing that raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen in your Zoom toolbar, or you can send us a chat message directly using the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom screen as well. Rachel, do you want us to go ahead and move on to the last slide here? I don't see any additional raised hands, and I don't see any additional chat messages.
Yep, I think it's okay that we have some downtime. If people aren't signed up to provide input and you don't have anyone raising their hand, I think we should just hang on here a little bit, maybe for 15, 20 more minutes or so, just to make sure that no additional participants enter the meeting, or people who are here with us today have some additional time to collect their thoughts and maybe want to provide some input.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Rachel. So we can just stay on this slide, as Rachel just said, for about 15 to 20 minutes. If any of our attendees who are currently on the meeting would like to offer their verbal public input, again, you can let us know by accessing the raise hand feature or sending us a chat message to let us know that you want to provide verbal input. You're welcome to drop off a little bit early if you'd like, or you're welcome to stick around for another 15 to 20 minutes to see if we get any additional raised hands or any additional attendees who want to offer a comment this evening. Again, this entire meeting is being recorded. And while we wait for potentially any more attendees or any raised hands, we did one last time drop the project website link into the chat feature. And just a reminder to everyone, we have this on the last slide as well, but scoping comments and input must be received by October 17th, 2022. Thank you. All right, I see a raised hand from Kyle Moselle. So Kyle, we'll get your name up on the screen here, and then we'll start your timer after you've spelled your first and last name. But let's get your name up there first, and then I'll ask you to unmute.
Text, Kyle Moselle.
All right, perfect. So Kyle, I'll go ahead and ask you to unmute. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. All right, if you want to spell your first and last name aloud for the record, and then we'll start your timer.
Thank you. My name is Kyle Moselle, Kyle. Moselle. I am the Executive Director for Office of Project Management and Permitting within the Alaska Department of Natural Resources. I'm providing comment on behalf of the state of Alaska tonight. In enacting the 2004 Alaska Land Transfer Acceleration Act, Congress prescribed a process to expedite settling the complex process by which the state and ANCSA corporations fulfilled their land entitlements. Section 207 of the Act directed BLM to review the D1 withdrawals and report to Congress on whether any of them could be opened to entry. BLM concluded that the vast majority had fulfilled their purpose and recommended lifting them through BLM's land use planning process. This and the more stringent requirements for managing development means the original protections from the D1 withdrawals are no longer critical for the protection of the public's interest. The D1 withdrawals are an unnecessary encumbrance on the public land records, complicating interpretation of the title record by the public. As described above, many of the withdrawals on BLM lands in Alaska have outlived their purpose and are an unnecessary encumbrance on the public land record, complicating interpretation of the title record by the public, and are no longer critical for the protection of the public interest. Moreover, since issuing their report to Congress, BLM evaluated lifting these D1 withdrawals in 5 resource management plans in Alaska. These plans followed the recommendations of the report and recommended lifting the vast majority of ANCSA D1 withdrawals, allowing the public use in accordance with existing land use plans, federal regulations, operating procedures, and multiple use laws. In determining whether the D1 withdrawals are needed to protect the public interest on the lands, BLM gave full consideration to the opportunity to achieve better management of federal lands and to meet the needs of state, local, and ANCSA corporations in their economy and the residents and their economies through a public involvement process and resource analysis. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kyle, for that input. I'll go ahead and put you on mute and lower your hand. While we wait for any additional participants who would like to provide input today, we have about 10 minutes remaining in that 15 to 20 minutes or so that we were going to provide attendees to decide if they wanted to provide their input this evening. So again, just like Kyle did, you can access that raise hand feature, or if you can't find your raise hand feature, you can send us a message in the chat box.
So it doesn't,
Ready
can
to
you
go to
hear
the
me
last
okay?
slide, Rachel?
I think we should give it 10 more minutes. And if at the end of 10 minutes, we don't have any other person in waiting to provide us input today, we will move on to the last slide and start closing up our presentation and public meeting tonight.
Sounds good. Thank you. Again, if you want to provide any verbal public input, you can access the raise hand feature or send us a chat message. Again, this entire meeting is being recorded, so if you need to drop off a little bit early, you're welcome to do so, or you can stick around for an additional 10 minutes. Thank you. We have about 5 minutes remaining before we move into our closing remarks slide. So again, if you would like to provide any verbal public input at this time, please let us know by accessing the raise hand feature, or you can send us a chat message. And looks like our phone caller dropped off, but if anybody needs to call in through the phone, you can press *9 on your phone keypad. All right, we can go ahead and move into our closing remarks slide. And Rachel, I will hand it over to you.
Slide, closing remarks. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Amanda. This concludes our virtual public meeting. We thank everyone for your participation. For more information, please visit the project website or email the BLM project manager, myself, at rajones@blm.gov. That's rajones@blm.gov. And please remember that you can also submit written comments until October 17, 2022. Have a good night.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I'll leave this slide up for a minute or two more, and then I'll close out of the meeting. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
More information is available at the project website, https://eplanning.blm.gov/eplanning/UI/project/20180002/510.